Hey team, and welcome. I'm your host, Carrie, creator of Mother Life, your destination for all things real talk and parenting. This is the IRL group chat, where we talk about the wild balancing act of pursuing careers and passions while also doing our best to show up for our kids. Join me every week as I sit down with some badass parents in my closet and we talk about their careers, kids, and relationships and all of the weird shit that comes up when you're trying to balance the seemingly impossible. Before having kids, I often felt like the minute I had them, my career would be frozen in time. That any success, status, or accomplishment had to be in motion before the kids showed up, or I'd never achieve it. Today's guest calls bullshit. For her, having a kid coincided with a career shift that would rewrite her story in a way that she never realized she had been preparing for her whole life. Katie Locke O'Brien is a TV director that has commanded the casts of shows like AP Bio and Ghosts and popular web series. Her latest web series, called Dick Bunny, LOL, is a meditation on new motherhood. And we really didn't realize that we really, really needed it. Listen to her story, relate, enjoy, and if you want, have a giggle at those kids who went to school in Boston. Wink, wink. Yeah, I actually
don't ask me about my kid.
I don't identify as a parent.
As a mom, like in the modern sense.
Could you imagine?
Like, am I a mom? Yes, genetically.
Theoretically, I did have a child, but I won't be discussing that today.
Now 7 years tomorrow.
Oh my God. Tomorrow?
Yes, you are also getting me fresh out of like a...
Did you go to the Emmys?
Full blackout. No. I threw a birthday party for 7-year-olds, which is like the Emmys in that I feel like I went into sort of like fugue state for 72 hours.
We have one this coming weekend for a 4-year-old. And I do feel though every year I'm like, we're not going to do this again. It's so much. And I feel I don't even drink. I feel so hungover afterwards.
Bigger and bigger. It was super fun.
You're going to want to take that jacket off. It's going to get a little sweaty.
It's going to be hot. Okay.
Okay. Great. Well, no, I want to catch you tired because that's honest.
It's true. It's true. I have much to say about
all of it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so first I'll just say welcome to the closet.
Thank you.
The last time we actually really saw each other was when you were doing a book tour.
Oh my gosh,
this was a very long time ago.
So long ago, yeah.
And like a career lifetime ago for you as well.
Yes.
So there's a lot to discuss.
A child, career, many things.
I want to talk about your career trajectory and where like partnership and parenthood enter the picture and enter the scene.
Yeah.
And I think for you, my guess is it's actually a pretty significant life-altering experience. It is for everybody, but how the two interplayed together. So I want to talk about that. And, you know, any tidbits, thoughts, feelings on like what it's like to be a parent now. I mean, the Surgeon General just told us we're all basically killing ourselves.
That's the worst
parent.
ever, yes. He's like, what is wrong with you guys?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about it all. But let's start. You grew up in New Hampshire.
I did.
With 5 people, as we have established.
The population of New Hampshire in the 80s was 5 people. I believe now it is 7.5 to 8. 8.25.
And when you were a little girl growing up in New Hampshire, did you have an eye toward getting out of Dodge? Like, I don't want to grow up here. I don't want to sort of have my life here. Or were you like, this is the best place, and if I stay here forever, I'll be happy?
Both. I know that's a weird answer, but I had like the most idyllic childhood. I grew up in a town called Hampstead. I loved it so much. I loved all the people in Hampstead.
All 2 of them?
It was like my parents, and then there were 3 squirrels. No, I really did. It was like absolutely whatever you can think of as the most like Americana movie you've seen about a small town in New England. It was that, and I truly loved it. It was the kind of thing where you could, you know, the entire town turned out for the Christmas parade and the 4th of July celebration, and you knew everyone and everyone's parents, and you could run around all over the town because somebody's parents who's a friend of yours were always nearby, and it would just felt so free in that way, and I just loved it. And I think I very happily could have stayed there forever, except that also from as long as I can remember, I think since preschool I did my first play. I was in love with acting and doing theater, and I just wanted to do that, and I loved Broadway, and I watched endless comedy shows, and I just kind of knew, even though I did a bunch of other stuff, that I really, really wanted to go into that. And those two things just couldn't coexist.
And were your parents creative? Were you growing up in a paradigm where that was normal, or was this sort of an escape or a divergence?
It wasn't overt, but yes, they're both very creative. So my mom, shortly after I was born, like when I was still a toddler, kind of realized she didn't want to go back to a traditional 9-to-5 kind of job, because she wanted to be around and with me during the day and take me to 10 billion dance classes over the course of my life. Thank you, Mom.
God bless her.
And play practices and so many car rides through the Merrimack Valley. But she also is incredibly talented, and so she started her own business out of our house as an interior designer, and worked for a huge amount of clients in all of the surrounding towns all over the area. So every time I was around her in my house, she was dreaming up a super cool window treatment and figuring out the math and then sewing it by hand and making it come to life, or a flower arrangement, or picking out fabrics. And I went with her on we picked paint colors, and we did, and so much of, I feel like, my visual sensibility that I now feel when I'm directing comes from that, and came from me watching her be like, okay, well, how do I build a life where I'm a mom and a creator somehow simultaneously, and I have, most importantly, agency over my time, which I think is the hardest part.
Impossible.
And so, like, before that was even a discussion, like nowadays we have to talk about that aggressively because, as you said, the Surgeon General is worried for us. But at the time, it wasn't really a thing that tons of people were thinking about, but I think that was just kind of intrinsically modeled to me. And then my dad was just a goof. And first of all, he was like an incredible dancer, like had won all of these dance competitions, jitterbug competitions, disco competitions.
I was going to ask,
he
like,
was
what
younger.
kind of dance are we talking about?
Oh my gosh, he was like a fantastic,
guys,
you get him at a wedding.
If you have never seen a photo of Katie, we are talking blonde hair and blue eyes, like not a hailing from a people maybe historically known for sense of rhythm.
Well, I don't know if you've seen those Irish people in the movie Titanic, like they really got down, and Kate Winslet had to keep up. I don't know.
Riverdance, famously, they're like excited that they don't move the top half of their body when they dance.
They're like, look how I can be both extremely arduously dedicated to being still at work, and also having a great time. No, my dad was like a jitterbugger, and like he was just a fantastic dancer, and one of those people who just like is constantly just like making up a song and singing it about whatever's going on and cracking jokes and whatever. And both of my parents are like really excellent storytellers. So like that was the dinner table for us. And so even though no one was sort of having a career in performance or music or film or something that would have been an obvious part of it, was very supportive. Yeah, it was very supportive, and they were totally behind it from go, and didn't treat it like a cute hobby. They were like, oh yeah, no, we believe you love this.
And so then you get to an age, that like 16, 17, where you're starting to think like, okay, what happens after this? Where do I go from here? And you decide that the best way to pursue this is to...
well, in my head, I was like, I'm going to the Broadway, which is what you think is going to happen directly when you are 16, right? I also was like very into academics and a total nerd and class president and all those. I was like the not bitchy Tracy Flick in my high school.
Great.
No evil machinations, just all the activities. And And so, yeah, so when it came time to go to college, I was like, all right, I just want to apply to all these theater programs everywhere. And I was like, my list obviously should just be like Northwestern and Carnegie Mellon and NYU, and I'm going to go to the Broadway and da, 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 and this is the plan. And then I weirdly didn't end up doing that because, and now I like, thankfully, I had an advisor guy in my high school, Ken Wiswell. I owe you everything.
Shout out.
Shout out to Mr. Wiswell, who was one of the administrators at the school, and he was the one who sort of was like, my daughter is at Harvard right now. And
have you heard of it, Harvard?
And I was like, first of all, there are 6 people in this state. I know real people go to Harvard. That's a pretend place. And he was like, she's there and she stage manages theater all the time. And I was like, what? And he and his wife took me down to see a play that she was stage managing.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, this is awesome. And so he was like, I really think you should go there. And I was like, this makes no sense. I will be tap dancing. Everyone else will be studying. I'll be a nightmare. Like, no. And I applied, and then I got in, and that was terrible because then I was like, well, I can't say no now, but I don't know if like this is against what I was sure was going to be this straight path. And I
love that Harvard was like sort of
I was like, crap.
back up. Like, fuck, I got into Harvard. That's terrible.
Now I cannot go. And I want to just be going and doing plays. And I went to my music teacher, Mr. Quigley, who gets the other half of all of the credit for the direction of my life. And I was like, only you will understand. I'm a performer. Like, I need to go. And he was the one who was like, oh, no, if you were my daughter, I would make you go to Harvard. And I was like, what? No. And he was like, you'll be such a more interesting artist for the rest of your life for surrounding yourself with tons of people who are interested in tons of different things and do different things. And you'll meet all these different people than in like studying art with 12 other people who are exactly on the same track as you are. And I was like, oh, shoot. And then they were both absolutely right. Like, I had the best time there.
And your parents are feeling what type of way? Like, they're just like, wait a minute.
Are such good parents that they were terrible in this moment because I was like, just lay the law down.
Tell
and
me
then
what
I'll
to
have
do.
to do right. And instead they were just like, nope, we really just want you to make the decision. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Harvard. And they were like, thank God. You know, but I got like the same exact scholarship for Harvard and Northwestern and all these. It was like down to those 2. Ironically, later, my husband went to Northwestern, and he still constantly is like, thank God you did not meet me in college. That worked out for the best. Like,
Kismet waited.
He's like, I wasn't ready.
Kismet waited.
Yeah. So it was like very strangely not the path I expected, and not as far away from home as I had expected. It was like an hour. But Boston still felt very different.
Yeah. And
more importantly, what ended up being so helpful to me, although I couldn't understand this until 20 years later, which is weird because I'm 28.
Yeah, so strange.
That's crazy how I did that math just now.
So insightful.
What was crazy about it is they didn't have a theater major at the time. And so, but there was a ton of theater. The American Repertory Theater is on campus. There's 20 plus student productions, and they're fantastic. But it means that the students are the producers, the directors, the writers, sometimes the choreographers. I did all of these jobs all through college because that's how we all got to do more theater. And then you just did that professionally 1 million hours a day on top of your classes. And so I would take all these English classes where I was like reading all these plays and studying all this dramatic literature, but then doing all the jobs. And at the time, it didn't occur to me that that sort of was my early foray into going beyond being an actor. It was just like, oh, well, this is what you do so that you can act here.
Yeah.
And only later when I started to branch out, which didn't happen until I was, until my son was like 3 months old even, did I realize like, oh, that the germination for that was way back.
Yeah. Some of this is actually muscle memory because I have had to do this before.
Yeah.
Now, going to a place like Harvard, obviously everyone has so many preconceived notions about it, what kind of person goes there, yada, yada. You stepping into that, having it not really been your plan initially.
Yeah.
Do you think that was sort of a gift because it felt, I mean, it just, you hear of kids finally getting there and they're so fucking burnt out from just trying to get there.
Yes. I was so pleasantly surprised. I was very nervous that it was just going to be all these people who were what you would think it was. And those people are there, but they keep to themselves, or they stay in the library, and it's okay. Or they go to like the weird social clubs, like the more specific social clubs that you see in, like the David Fincher film, The Social Network. And so, so they're kind of doing their own thing. Every other human being that I met was just the most grounded, down to earth, and like awesome, this person will change the world in a great way somehow person. And then months into knowing that, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's true, that happened right after I won the field medal when I was 7. Sure. You're like, wait, what? But like no one was being what I thought.
Yeah.
And it really was just a campus of people who were insanely passionate about all the things they liked to do and insanely supportive, like
of everyone else.
Everyone went to see a water polo match and every play that we put up and this and that. It was like everything you went to was packed all the time, and people just were so supportive of each other's. Everyone just like professionally extracurrulared.
Now, how do you, to this day, how do you deal when somebody's like, oh, where did you go to school?
I never talk about it, except you asked me so pointedly that we had to now talk about this the whole time.
Yeah, well, it's in my notes. Well, there's a reason, right? There's two things. Well, first you have to answer that question. When people are like, where'd you go to college? Because they're famously
Boston. And
it's
the answer is Boston.
Or like, this school in Cambridge. Fuckers, we know it's fucking Harvard. We're happy for you. It's okay. But it's funny, right? Because like we're a little bit scared.
But you also can't lead with it, right? It's like,
it's a no-win situation.
It's a no-win. And I just had my cough 20th reunion this past spring, and the whole time I was there, I was just like so emotionally like, I love these people. Everyone here is still my best friends. I'm so inspired. Pete Buttigieg is in my class. He's like talking to people. Like all these people are amazing, right? And I was like, God damn it! Like, why can't I just be so proud of? I'm so proud of this. Yeah.
I think you should be.
Only in this closet,
but only in this closet. It's okay. Nobody except for all the people who will listen to it.
Yeah, great.
But then the other reason why I do obviously have an interest is twofold. And we'll get to the third point as well, which is the straight A conspiracy. But the first two pieces are, like, we are parents raising kids in a very different world from the one that we grew up in. And the utility of college and how we think about university and higher education, like, that is potentially going to be different for our kids.
Yep.
And at the same time, you have on the other end of the spectrum the old classic keeping up with the Joneses, being in competitive academic environments, and still schools like Harvard, went to NYU, like competitive, and people still really want those sorts of outcomes for their kids.
Yeah.
So it's just when you've had that experience and then you think, oh, well, what would I want for my kid? Would my kid do well in this sort of environment?
Right.
And like your parents were model citizens by saying like, it's up to you.
Yes.
But I definitely think there are plenty of parents out there that are like, it's up to you between these 10 schools.
It's up to you between Harvard and Harvard.
Right, exactly. Or like, if you must Yale or whatever.
Yeah.
So like, I've taken a renewed interest in college and university because of the fact that like we have people who will one day maybe go. And now it's only a maybe.
And that part is actually quite sad to me because for me, the extreme value of that experience had very little to do with like things I could have just looked up on the internet. Yeah. You know what I mean? It wasn't really about the classes, although I took amazing classes and I still remember stuff and it blew my mind. But 100%, I think that having a 4-year stretch where you don't actually have to be a full grown-up yet, but are feeling what independence could be like for you, and having to interact with other students that way in close quarters, in a dorm, in a new, like, those are all new things that you've added to what you know, and that you have to like kind of be a grown-up and go talk to your professor when things are, and that you have this free reign to try a million things. Like, there will never be another time in your life where you can be like, I don't know, do I love geology? And then you're like, yes, but it's not going to be my career. Good to know. You know, it's like, and there's not much on it, and you're just exploring and figuring out how to be your own person. That, I don't know how to replace that. But that also, I spent many years post-college as my support job, working with students, tutoring.
I love that. Wait, a support job. Did you say support job? But I've never heard that term before. That's like you're pursuing your dream, which is at the time acting.
Yeah.
And the support job is the thing that you hear in every sort of actor's or, you know, successful person's story. The working at Starbucks, the tutoring for you. I've never heard it called that before.
Oh, support job. Yeah, because I was fortunate to pick a thing I actually enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I was like, I don't resent it. It's allowing me to stay in LA. It's supporting me while I try to go to these auditions and figure out what I'm doing here. And
so you use those smarts.
So support. But all the time that I was working with all those students, I especially learned how much every single school out there is very different in terms of its personality of the campus. And like, even among the Ivies, there are 3 or 4 that I would have been a disaster at, and I would go visit friends there and be like, oh no, these are not my people. You know what I mean? And vice versa. And they would have hated it on our campus. And same thing. It's so much of it has to do with like finding the place where you can find yourself. And I do think there were a lot of people who got to Harvard and that was the last great thing for them. And then they were just stuck at this place that they thought in their mind they wanted, that wasn't actually for them, or it was their parents' dream or whatever. And it didn't go well, and they didn't really take advantage of the million things that were at their fingertips, and they kind of hated it there.
Yeah.
And I was like literally every day like throwing glitter in the air, like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I get to be here.
Yeah. So it just like depends, you know. You have to sort of find, you both in that process of like deciding on the whole college thing, you have to find the place where you feel like you've found your people. And if they say no to you, it's probably
for the best,
a benefit. Yeah. Because they know who's gonna be happy.
So you have this amazing experience. We're throwing glitter. We're doing all the productions. We're doing all the jobs. And obviously the natural conclusion is you're not going to do the Broadway. You're going to come to Los Angeles.
Well, I went first to the Broadway.
Okay, you did the Broadway.
First of all, everyone else was like, I'm graduating and now I'm going to be a consultant and I'm making $1 bazillion.
Sure.
And I was like, I'm going to go eat peanut butter for 3 years and live in New York, but not in a nice apartment. And I'm going to have one roommate from school and a bunch of other roommates who are cockroaches. And this is what we're doing. And
she means literal cockroaches, people.
Yes, I do. So
not
many.
Like she wasn't saying something mean about people.
So, oh no.
She just meant
they
actual
came
physical...
out of the outlets and out of our phone, which at the time was a wall phone. And you know what? That gives
that was
you
part of your story.
A backbone.
Yeah.
That's good. So I went to New York first, and because again, similar to Harvard, like Los Angeles was not a real place.
Sure.
Where actual human beings lived.
Honestly, I'm still not sure.
I know. I'm working on it still, getting to the place where I'm convinced. But at the time, I was like, oh, you can't just move there. Like, you might as well move to the moon.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go to New York. And even that felt like a huge, crazy leap. And I was there for 3 years and was doing a ton of theater, but started to feel pretty quickly like not creative, I guess. Because a lot of the things I would audition for, it was like, well, you know, the tour is already going. We're looking for someone to, you know, fill in and take over for this person. It's the same choreography you've done before in other productions of 42nd Street, and this is what it is. And it wasn't like generative. And then and by the 3rd year I was there, I was doing like entirely UCB and tiny weird plays in the Village, and I made a gross $75. And I was like, not sustainable, but so fun. And thankfully, my manager in New York was the one who was like, I think you maybe should try to see what LA is like for you.
So when did you get a manager in this process? That's not a straightforward thing.
No. But I think at the time, this was, you know, eons ago. And so I feel like I got that manager through some sort of showcase type of night through the acting school that I was doing, like the acting classes I was going to. I think I was going to like West Barron at the time for learning how to like do on-camera stuff or something. I don't remember, but through some organized something that you had to pay money for.
Of course.
You know, I got to audition in front of a bunch of managers, and she signed me, and she was very nice. And again, like, credit to her, she was like, I think you're in the wrong city. And I was like, what? So, but, you know, those 3 years were helpful because that's how I met my husband, too, was doing one of those plays.
Tell us that meet cute.
It's
or not so cute.
It's a crazy one. No, totally cute. He was at Northwestern. He graduated from Northwestern and put an ad on Craigslist that was like, I just graduated. I have all these plays I've written. If anyone needs a play, write to me on Craigslist, right? And some director from New York,
Craigslist.
back in the day, some director from New York was like, oh yeah, I want to put something up at the Gene Frankel, you know, send me what you have. And then I think 8 months went by or something, and he thought it wasn't going to be a thing. And then this guy decided to put up a play of Dave's. And so, meanwhile, in the apartment with all the cockroaches, my best friend Sam Perwin and I, cut to 45th and 9th, and my best friend from college and my roommate Sam Perwin was auditioning for that play. And he kept coming home and like having me read with him, and he just over and over was like, I'm so mad you didn't audition for this. You would really love this writer. It's exactly your sense of humor. Yeah. And I was like, oh, man. And then I would read it and I'd be like, oh, I do love this writer. I totally should have auditioned for this. And he even so much as gave me the full play to read on the subway while I went to all my dance auditions that day, which normally with an audition, you just like read the 2 pages, crumple it up, never think about it again, right? And I read the whole thing and I was like, oh, God, you know.
Yeah.
And so then we went home.
Did Sam get the role?
Oh, well, this is part of the drama. So we went to visit Sam's family for Hanukkah in Miami. And while we were there, the director called him and was like, you know, I'm so excited. You did great, except we've worked with the other guy. It was down to you and one other guy. We've worked with him before, so he's getting the role. And we're like, no. And then we came back to New York, and the director called him up and said, that guy's got a conflict. You're in. We're like, yay. And Sam went to have coffee with the director, and he was like, okay, I'm so glad you can do it, but I'm still in trouble because one of the girls dropped out. And he was like, which one? He's like, the blonde who comes in. And he's like, oh my God, here. So I auditioned at like a bar in the East Village at 9:00 in the morning. There were like 2 old men day drinking, and then me in the corner doing multiple characters from a farce. Like, great. Got the part, and it was a super fun run. I made a ton of great friends in that cast. And then Dave had nothing to do with it, but he came out to see the production. So we talked for like 2 hours after the show. And then...
Where was he living at the time?
In LA. He went straight to LA. And so, because he wanted to work in TV, and he already like knew that. And so he, you know, we like talked for 10 million hours at B-Bar, and then 8 months later or something, when I decided to move to LA, I was like, hey, I know 4 friends from college and you, what's fun here? And we started hanging out, and that's, you know, the rest
He's like,
is
what's
history.
fun? I'm fun.
Yes, he was like, let me show you. So that part of my New York journey was like generative in its own way, right?
So then you get here and you're 23, 24?
Oh, that's kind. I guess I was like 20.
There was a time that you were that age.
That's true. Even though my skin is not
you still look like a child bride. It's fine.
Thank you. That's my goal. That's my fashion goal. That's the aesthetic I'm going for.
Yeah.
25, let's say.
Okay, so you get here. LA is obviously a stark departure from New York.
It is, yes.
And what's the game plan?
Well, on the first night that I arrived here, I went out in Santa Monica with couple people that I knew, and I met, they were like, oh, here are some like local friends at this bar. And I met this girl, and she was like, oh, what'd you tell? I was like, well, I just moved here from New York, but I'm actually from New Hampshire. And she said to me, oh, New Hampshire, I'm not familiar.
Never met her.
And I was like, with its work, or like, what are we talking about? And so that was exciting. So then I was like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. So it was a really and also in that same week, I arrived with very big plans, and the 2007 writer's strike began, and I was like, here I am. Oh, nobody is working. Everything shut down.
Sure.
Cool. So that was terrible at the time, but gave me, I think, a lot of time to just figure out the life parts of my life with a little less pressure on it.
Fewer cockroaches?
Way fewer cockroaches, to figure out, like, where am I living and what is going on. And I got into some, involved in, like, theater companies and things. And so it wasn't like I had to sort of hit the ground running with, auditions and TV stuff and whatever. There was a little bit of a slower burn, but it let me kind of get my life started in a way that was more sustainable for then when stuff started to come back.
And how old were you when you got the idea for this project, the Straight A Conspiracy Project?
That actually just came out of a desire to sort of spread more. Like we Hunter Motz and I had been kind of tutoring here, just like working with kids one-on-one, and that was, he was out here to write and act, and I was out here to act, although quickly started writing also and whatever. And we just were working with so many different kids and seeing the same issues over and over again and helping kids work through them. And so much of it was about sort of their beliefs about themselves and school and learning, and had so little to do with whether they actually knew how to, add fractions. And so at a certain point, we just sort of looked at each other and we were like, we're here to do writing. We've stumbled onto this thing that is really changing a lot of these kids' lives, and we can only currently deliver that like one kid at a time in an hour session. And so what if we found a way to write this and kind of democratize it a little bit? And so we started writing this book, The Straight A Conspiracy. And so then there was this stretch where my support job it became, we did a ton of research. It took 5 years all in to sort of go from the initial ideas and outlines of how to kind of deliver a message about neuroscience to disgruntled 14-year-olds who hate reading.
Sure.
But we sort of put this book together and started testing it out and using stories from our own experience and all this stuff. And it really took off. And there was, a whole book tour, and we went on the Today Show, and we did this whole giant thing and really got it out there. And that was so satisfying in a way. And I think that also was like one of these early moments that kind of felt so empowering in terms of like, yes, the acting is a big part of it. And I think that was a big part of how much understanding emotional intelligence played into even the approach we were sharing with kids about learning. But it also was like, oh, you can take and make your own thing out of nothing.
And was there ever a moment where you said, okay, like this has been really successful, maybe I should pivot and just have this be my full-time thing? Have you ever wondered, wow, I would love for this podcaster to sell me something already? Well, you're in luck. Today I'm selling you on something highly exclusive, highly niche, highly Mutha. Just kidding, we're in the early stages over here, but if you've got a company or a cause you'd like to promote on the pod, get in touch. We're a good time. Or were you just like, this is,
it couldn't
the art
be.
is burning deep inside me?
I know. It was sort of always so tough because because there's absolutely something there, and it was worth taking as far as we could. And also it would have sort of done a disservice to it and me and whatever work we were trying to do with it for me to try to pretend I didn't also just really want to be storytelling more, you know what I mean? And so, it's still alive, and we still, share it with people, and the book gets used around, and constantly we talk about how we should be like picking it back up and making bigger things happen with it. But
You're
also so much
busy
has happened
also,
artistically in the
though.
meantime that it's,
You're a little busy now.
Yeah.
So in the intervening period, you get loved up. You guys decide to start a more formalized life together. You get married. Mm-hmm. Where in the picture should we have kids? Do we want kids? Did you always know you wanted to have kids or a kid?
I always knew I wanted a family, yes. And also had an idea in my mind that I think a lot of women probably grapple with in these times in modern society, which was this idea that having a kid was going to mean that I would sort of cease to exist as a person.
Yeah.
At least for some significant stretch of time. And I knew it wasn't sort of my personal personality, I guess, to just drop everything and be a mom. I was like, I don't think I will feel like a fulfilled real person if that's the path. But I also don't understand how you're supposed to do this other thing. And sort of in that same time period, something interesting happened, which is that I had been acting, and I was acting in TV, and some stuff was happening, but I also started writing. And a friend of mine and I initially we created a couple of characters and tested them out in our acting class, and people were into it. And so we shot this, or first we wrote a pilot, immediately realized that we had no reps and no one would read this pilot.
Sure.
And so rewrote it as a 10 episode web series. And this was way back early in the web series verse. And we just, got 10 grand cobbled together and shot 100 minutes of footage, which I still don't understand how that happened. But, and we made this show called The Hub. And when we got done with it, we we had written the whole season. We played the 2 characters ourselves. We sent it to everyone we'd ever met in an email. And we were like, here is a teaser of a thing if you know people who like things. And it worked, and it got optioned, and a showrunner got attached, and we sold it to IFC. And that led to reps as writer, creator, performers. And it led to, more chances to pitch things. And we had this run where I think 4 different times we would sell a show that we were going to star in and write and develop it for a year, and then get into pre-production even, and then it would go away for some reason having nothing to do with the job we did or the show, right?
Famously.
And it was IFC didn't have any money in their budget actually that year to make any of those things. And then and then we did one for ABC Digital, RIP immediately, and Stage 13 for Warner Brothers, RIP immediately, and Quibi and all the
Quibi.
And so it was but at each of those things I would say to myself, okay, as soon as one season of this project has been made and is out in the world, I will exist. And so, I will have done something that people can see that is clear enough that, if I then had to disappear for a year and be in my house, I could still return and anyone would care. The world won't forget about me. Whatever I was convincing myself. And so that happened over and over and over and over. And finally, I was just what am I doing? And I got really great advice from a friend of mine who was about 10 years older. And she was just what are you waiting? If there's no good day, there's no a day when suddenly it's convenient to set a bomb off in your life as you know it. So whatever, you can just decide. And I was what? Yeah. And then I also wasn't a person who sort of walked around the world and was oh my God, I see a baby at Jones on 3rd and my ovaries leap across the room. I was no, I just generally know I want that, but I'm not feeling on fire about it or something. And she was yeah, it's okay. You can just intellectually make the choice too. That's fine. Not everybody's the same. And I was oh, that's so liberating. And so it really had to be just a choice like that, because for that 4-year stretch or 3 years or whatever it was, Dave would regularly
Nobody was going to make the decision for you. Oh,
well,
and
Dave
he was
would
just
regularly bring up, and he'd be here we are in the kitchen. So what are we thinking on that front? And I would always be well, the thing is, and start crying immediately. Right. And he would just be cool. We'll revisit this in 3 months.
And it's so interesting because, and similar things happened in this household as well. But what's so interesting about that is your partner can sit with you in a place of deep love, admiration, and respect. But if you are in a heteronormative relationship, they can actually never understand that feeling and the terror of that ceasing to exist point and understanding that. So it's a funny, not so funny thing where it's just intellectually they want to support, but it's not super logical from the outside, but it's also a deeply felt thing. And so it's just a really there's just a dissonance.
Yeah. Yeah. And
in
I
the
was
thing.
just like, it's not, you just can't, it's just, it will never be even.
Yeah.
Even if you are totally trying to be the most modern,
Yeah.
you know,
Feminist king out there.
feminist partner. Yeah. And so I just really was like panicked about that. I was like, I haven't done enough yet. I haven't accomplished enough.
Where
can't,
is his career at this point?
stop my life.
And while these
He
discussions
was
are
doing
happening.
great. He's so funny. He's had a very almost old school in its shape, like extremely traditional path. He came to Hollywood. He knew he wanted to be a TV writer. He was like an assistant, and then he was a showrunner's assistant, a writer's room assistant, and then a staff writer, and then and he just like each season kept working and climbed up the ladder of things. And so he had gotten to the place at that point where he was like the number 2 on a couple of shows. And the next step was going to be for him to become a showrunner when one of his projects would take off. So he was in a place where it was like a dependable trajectory that was going on. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm even a writer now. I'm not sure. And in that whole stretch too, I had begun dabbling with directing, although 0% treating it like a job I could have. And really it was just like a hobby that I liked to do on the side.
Now, what do you think was mentally holding you back from entertaining the world of possibilities?
Easily the combination of I had worked as an actor on a bunch of shows, and maybe 1 in 15 times was there a woman directing the episode.
Okay, so we didn't see ourselves.
So we did not see that was a thing. Like if you were like, who's a female director? I'd be like, Penny Marshall, but I don't know how you just become Penny Marshall, right? And so it was a combination of that and the fact that I didn't go to film school. I don't care about Citizen Kane. It's great. I saw it once. I've seen Three Amigos 1,000 times. And Spaceballs. And
Respect. Respect.
Yeah. And at the time I was like, that can't be an education. It turns out it absolutely is, and is my superpower now. But like, but that, so I was like, oh, well, it's not like a real job I could have, obviously. Like directors don't look like me. But so many people, when we kept kind of making our own things, were always like, I think you might be a director. And I just over and over was like, do I have too many thoughts on set as an actor? I can totally tone that down, Yeah. And so it really, and I started trying it out, and I was making weird shorts with my friends. And every time I did it, I was like, this feels right. This is the nexus of all the things I love to do. It's like writer brain, actor brain. It feels like choreography to me when I'm camera blocking, like all of that stuff. But it never occurred to me that it could be my job. It wasn't even like, oh, I can't be that. It was like not even a thing.
You're like, I didn't train for this. I'm,
you could just be that, right? And so, but it was in the mix already, which was important because so finally we just like decide. I'm like, fine, we're gonna. And I gave Dave a huge speech. Like on the day that I decided we were ready to try to have kids, I was like, here is my speech. I've prepared it. Sit down. I was like,
take notes.
I was like, sit down. Here we go. I was like, okay. All of our friends who are trying to have kids, it takes a year, 2 years. You don't know, right? Yeah. And it's 3 months even to try to get off birth control. So like, we're going to have plenty of time.
We've got some runway.
And I can be ready in 1 year. And so he was like, okay. And so so I was like, all right, this is the plan. And then the plan commences. And then the day after 3 months had passed, I was pregnant. And I was like, no, but I gave that whole speech. Like, that can't go like this,
Famously.
And so, on the one hand, knock on wood, that was very lucky that it was fast. And I also was not ready. And so, but there we go. It was underway. And so that was all fine. And then we were getting ready for Julian's arrival, and on basically my due date, Dave's first show got greenlit to series. So he became a showrunner on my due date, which is
Crosby sold a spec on my due date.
The shower of blessings and a nightmare. I was like, oh, instead of being these like modern co-parents that are both home, you are moving to Sony for 2 years. Cool. And it's just so insane right away, And so he was like, all in on that, and the first 3 months were so hard. But
what was the support system like for you in that? Like, who rallied? Who was there? What help were you getting?
My mom was there for a bunch in the beginning, but she lives across the country, so couldn't obviously like move in with us, although I would love that. And Dave's mom lives in town and was helpful, and we had some childcare, although I also was still in this early phase of like not being totally okay with asking for help yet.
Yeah.
I'm very good at it now.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, anyone who wants to pick up Julian from school, you're welcome to. But at the time, it was sort of, I was really grappling with that idea of like, but if I'm not doing all the things, am I not
a real
being
mom?
a good mom or something? And so it took, so the first 3 months are like Navy SEAL training, and then you sort of like come out of that on the other side. And that just happened to be kind of the stretch or the moment really when I was like, okay, I have this much bandwidth for myself now. My hands are very close to each other.
Very close to each other.
Very close together. And so I can't, I can't like audition for everything under the world and produce your short and act in your thing for free and write this thing for no reason. And, and so of all this creative stuff, like, what do I most wish I was doing? If I could pick one thing, if I'm being honest with myself, it's directing. And then that was the same week that NBC announced the first year of their Female Forward program.
Wow.
And my friend sent me the application, and I was like, what? I will never get into this, because, which was true. In the first year, most of the women who got in were like, well, I've been to Sundance 14 times, but no one will give me one episode of New Amsterdam. I was like, what? There is no justice in the world. But I was like, well, it's good to be declarative. Let me send my like 4 weird short films, one of which is my friend playing a human tomato.
Sure.
And see what happens. and it worked. And I got in, and a few months later I made a short for this like HBO Women in Comedy Festival thing, and it had to be a 5-minute short film off a prompt. And I came up with like all these crazy ideas, and then I was like, I can't even shower most days. Like, how am I going to shoot any of these movies? And so I just made a movie with my son, who was 5 months old, starring the two of us in our house. And it went to like 30 festivals and got all these awards, and all of that led to my first TV episode. So it's so funny to me always, and that's like a very long-winded story, but I always sort of like to share all of that because I was so certain that becoming a mom would be like the end of that part of me, and instead it was like the beginning of this thing that took off that I didn't even know was possible or was part of my creativity. And now looking back, even as far as college, right, I'm like, oh yeah, everything, I didn't need to go to film school. Like everything I was doing that whole time was all part of what I do now, and it was all just coming together in this right way at the right time, and at the right time that the industry was ready for it. But I didn't, there was no, it was like so unintentional.
Yeah.
And yet every piece was in place when it was time.
It was subliminally intentional.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about both you and your husband's careers is that you both do things where if somebody says they want to do your thing or they want you to be a part of their thing, like it's really hard to say no because you don't know the next time somebody's going to ask you.
Yes.
And when you have 2 people living that life in the same household and a child to take care of,
it is bonkers.
How does that calculus work out? Like, what's the decision-making matrix for who gets a turn?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are jerks because so far we have been extremely lucky and have not had any moments of total simultaneity.
Yeah.
Thank God. I don't
love
know.
how you just can simultaneity. It just rolls off the tongue like it's a word you're saying all day long. She went to Harvard, if you didn't catch that.
It's like I'm dreading the moment when it's like, oh, all of a sudden, like I have to shoot this out of town and you have to make this thing different out of town. Like, I don't know what that's going to be. And we're going to have to figure it out. Also, because we're just barely now, my son is in first grade this year. It's like we're now finally to the point where he actually can't leave school for whatever amount of time we feel like. Up until this, he's been extremely mobile, and that's great. I just put him in my suitcase and we've gone wherever we need to go, right? And so we had this, it's just worked out in this crazy balance way, partially thanks COVID, where Dave's show ran for, oh my God, that was so helpful for like my schedule. Dave's show ran for 2 seasons, and then kind of due in large part to the pandemic's beginning, was finished after those 2 seasons. And so he was on set nonstop. But that was when I was really just barely dipping my toe into laying the groundwork. And so I worked on, maybe 4 total episodes, but they were also in town because everything shot here, especially comedies at the time. So it wasn't that hard. It was like, yes, we'll have like 2 weeks at some point where we're both very busy, but we can get help with that. And it's short and I don't feel like I've missed any milestones and whatever. So that was kind of fine. COVID happened. When we came back from COVID, now Dave was like in development and just on his laptop, wherever. And that was the year, 2021 was the year where where it like really took off. I had sort of announced to Dave at the start of the year, well, that's it. I'm going to have to start over because they're going to go back to all the veteran people. Everything is crazy, whatever. And then I was like, what? Hello? Oh, actually, can you watch Julian until maybe April? And then it was just never stopped. But everything had left town. So it was like 3 months in Montreal and then a month and a half in Vancouver and then a job in Atlanta and it was all over. But Dave was working on his laptop. So every time I got a job, I was just like, you can have me, but you are also getting my husband, child, and our dog. And they were like, okay. And the productions were very kind. And so I just carted the entire family to all of those places. And so now, but then there was strike, and so it's been kind of off and on in a way that has sort of balanced out for us so far. And I do not know what's going to happen when we both have to shoot out of town.
A duel. So pretty unusual time and opportunity for your husband to also put his mark and decide on how he wants to parent, because you don't really have the time to micromanage his ass because you're working.
Yes. Oh, he would probably beg to differ. I still manage. I'm pretty good at that.
I mean,
but...
like, a spreadsheet,
I still find ways.
A spreadsheet here and there, like, of course, like extremely detailed 12-step directions for a sandwich, fine.
Correct.
But to be faced with that, I am the person in this house in this moment because my wife is off doing work.
Yes.
And this child is being extremely challenging because at that age, like, they are having big feelings about a lot of things and they can't really articulate it. And you do have to walk with them in this psychotic post-apocalyptic path. He's having to kind of navigate that without you because he's not going to call you on set and be like, hey, babe, Julian's now prostrate on the floor.
Right.
Losing his mind.
Yeah, he did do, Dave did pretty well. He will still from time to time, I'll be shooting and then he'll be like, wait, was I supposed to also pack snack? And I'm like, it's not the first time you've done
this. It's fucking snack.
Of course a kid needs a snack. So like it does still have, there are still many questions where I'm like, this could have been asked another way.
Yeah.
But like, but generally speaking, he's like, it does pretty well. And then also it's a good lesson for me because I am sort of like so on top of it kind of person, not to the level of like extreme helicopter like schedules, like a spreadsheet for the family, but certainly like all the details, all the everything. I'm on the case. And then, sometimes I go to set and I'm shooting all day and I get home after I've been gone for, 13, 14 hours and Julian's there and the dudes look like they've had a great dinner and Julian's shorts are on backwards and I'm like, have those been like that all day? And Dave's like, oh, weird. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay.
That's fine.
They're fine. You know what I mean?
He's wearing clothes. That's great.
Like, clothes happened. Weird choice. And that sock is not the, but like, and then you're just like, yeah, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they're both happy. They survived. Great. It's fine.
It is. Yeah. That is the art of deciding what to let go of is an evolving one.
I'm still working on it. Yep.
I think we all are. Now, this new web series that's come out, Dick Bunny.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, because I do really identify with that 3-month period where like you're kind of on your own because Dave is off doing this project. And I can't help but like feel some of that, even though that character's husband is physically there. It's a very, different kind of dynamic. But it can be a really dark place. And for all of the fears that you had going into motherhood before, I'm going to disappear, I'm going to whatever.
Yeah.
Then
you do.
Dave goes off and does this big project and you are at this crossroads in your own career and you are home for 3 months alone. Do you just say like, I was right, I have disappeared?
Yeah, 100%, of course, because you are nobody, and this is part of why I like a lot of the storytelling that I've done since the short I made, this web series, is about that first stretch, because I think that we don't actually, there's not actually anything I could have watched or read at the time. Nothing existed that was the thing that I needed.
Yeah.
Which is that they send you to 55,000 classes where they show you 3 different ways to put on a diaper, and you learn CPR and you do all the things, and nobody says to you, oh, by the way, we should mention that your former identity is going to burn into a tiny pile of ashes, and then it's going to be gone. And then while you're breastfeeding, you'll have to also like construct a new one and figure out who that is out of whatever Legos you can find. And good luck, and like no one talks about it. And if you bring it up, you're probably some terrible mom, and who can you actually talk to about it that's not also so in the thick of it at the same time
that they're just going to make it worse.
They're just going to make it worse, or they're going to be like, you'll get through it, and you're like, will I? And it's not even about, like, it is insanely hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done and all of that, but it really was that thing of just like, I don't know who I am anymore, because there's nothing that can kind of prepare you for the feeling of your agency having completely disappeared. And this is an advertisement for having a child. You're welcome, guys.
Yeah.
No, it'll get better. But in that beginning, it's like you all of a sudden I can't even stand up to go get that coffee cup, because we're just here in the chair and the child is eating, and that's just going to take as long as it takes. Yep. And I just wait until it's done. And the world goes on outside my window, and I am here. And then the next thing happens. Oh, but then we're going to stop what we're doing because the child needs a thing, and it's like, you're just like, the whole time you just sit there and it's quiet and you're like, remember brunch?
Yeah.
Like, some people go to brunch at like 1 p.m.
The other day I was at Trader Joe's.
I still have that thought sometimes.
I have it all the time. The other day I was at Trader Joe's, and the checkout guy, I see him all the time. Shout out Roland. And Roland is looking tired. Like, he's looking tired, and I was like, are you all right, man? He's like, oh, it's my friend's birthday last night, and I got home at 5 a.m. And I was like, what world is happening? What are you doing? I mean, he's like in his early 20s. So much is
going on that we, I mean, I would never.
I had so many questions. I'm like, okay, so you go to the bar, and then what happens? And he's like, well, then we go to somebody's house. And I'm like, and what are we doing at the house? I'm like, walk me through it. Walk me through
by
it.
Step. What are
and
these
by
things?
the end of him checking me out, I was like, I need you to ring that little bell and tell someone to bring you some water.
Yes, good job.
And he was like, okay,
possibly
we're gonna have
electrolytes.
yeah. And I was just like, wow, this is a different life.
His life begins when you go to bed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it did also feel really good, because I was like, this is really hard. And also, Roland, like, I don't want to be doing what you're doing.
I know. You know what? I don't miss it.
That doesn't sound fun. Brunch sounds fun, though, to be fair.
I do miss brunch. But yeah, but just like in that beginning, you're just like, oh, I just don't understand. It's so hard to, and no one gets it. And you're also alone all day. You're like the only person who can even appreciate how much I'm killing myself to keep this child alive. Can't talk. Because it's
can't
this kid.
talk.
So that's too bad for me.
Yeah.
And listen, nature has figured it out so incredibly to the second that, like, on the exact minute when you're like, I actually don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm losing my mind. I'm so tired. I might walk out the front door.
Your kid goes, at you.
Hey, and you're like, oh my god, I love you so much. And then you're in again, right? And this is like, that always happens on cue, and you're like, I don't understand, but okay, good job.
Yeah.
I'll stay. And the first 3 minutes, and it really is just the whole time I was like, yeah, I get why, like, sleep deprivation is a successful torture method, because, like, I was losing my mind. Yeah. And so no one talks about that, right? And then you sort of get very surfacey
or they
things.
do talk about it, and it's either like such a trope, it's almost like so over dramatized, it doesn't kind of catch the subtlety and the nuance, or you're like not ready to receive it. Also,
you're not ready to receive it. And I think anything that we see, and especially in comedy, like, we see either the mom who's kind of covered in spaghetti sauce and is like in front of the high chair, like, kids are hard. And I'm like, well, you can change your shirt. Like, you can't fix the fact that, like, your
identity is cracking inside.
Yes. That person died. R.I.P. Or it's, the mom who's like drunk and kind of regrets her kids. And I get why I should laugh at that, but I also don't feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I can be sad about this like massive shift that's going on with me and also love this kid so much. And what does that mean? You know, and there sort of was like nothing in the middle. And so, you know, so first I made this short that was called Have It All, that was really just about a morning of like me trying to get ready to go to a meeting. And it felt like an action sequence to me, just trying to get myself and the baby out the door. And that's all it was, right? And it was so totally straightforward, but it really, like, in the making of it, I was very focused on the fact that, like, the baby is not the enemy. The baby's being a perfect baby in every way. And he went, and I, you know, knock on wood, I had a very easy baby, all things considered. And also the guys that were running the meeting that I was trying to meet on time were also trying to be helpful. They were like, no, it's okay. Great news. Like, you can bring a baby to Soho House if it's for breakfast. I was like, oh my God. Because I like couldn't find a sitter, you know. And so I was like, thank you. You're so progressive. This is great. And so they were also trying to be helpful. And it's actually just the idea that anyone can pull these things off alone that is the enemy, right? And I just made that in such a vacuum, right? I felt like it's so isolating that time. It's so lonely in this weird way where you have like this massive influx of new love, and also you've never felt like more of an island in your whole life. And so there was like this whole weird thing, and I just made this short in the middle of that. And then when it came time to take it to festivals, like every woman that watched it was like, oh my God, like running across the theater. And I was like, oh, holy moly, yeah, like none of it, they were all like, that's my life. And I was like, that's hilarious, because I was thinking, even while I was making it, will anyone get this, or am I totally weird? Like, do other people do these things with their babies? Like, and it was so unifying in this weird way where I was like, what? And so then Dick Bunny came along, greatest title. Dick Bunny came along, the scripts got brought to me, Susie Mendoza, who's the writer, and Kim Griffin, who's the lead actress, and they were like, you know, we want to show you this thing. And I was like, I don't, you know, I sort of did my mom story already. I'm good, whatever. But right away, I just was like, this is the best depiction of what it felt like to me ever, because it is insane. There's so much magical realism. The first thing that we find out, like when we go inside of her brain, is just like an empty vacuum of like a jar of nuts and bolts rattling around. And I was like, yeah, that is exactly how I felt during that time. Yeah. And it just, the script already on the page just did so much to marry how completely out of your mind you feel with all of the like genuine feelings that are going on during that stretch. And I was like, oh, this is such a fun playground. And I feel like people can really benefit from it. Like, I feel like there are like women and men, and there's just tons of people could. It's just a story about anxiety and loneliness ultimately, but it's sort of like,
it's funny,
humanizes, but it is actually a comedy.
Cute.
It's so weird. There are puppets. There's like,
it's actually funny, unlike the bear, just to be clear.
I have a lot to say about the bear too, if you have an extra hour. Yeah, so it's like that's what I wanted to do, is sort of have this like huge, crazy, over the top comedy that also feels like very human in that way. And
I'm really excited for people to see it. I'm going to put a link in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah.
So the performances are really great. It's just like very enjoyable. I also think it like is the appropriate, each episode's 7-ish minutes.
Yeah, each episode we just made as long as it deserved to be. That's the freedom of the web. And so some are like 10 and some are 6.
Yeah,
and it kind of
it's also kind of great for somebody who might be in that stage of life, because often that's the amount of time you get.
Correct.
So
yes.
It's like about the length of time of like one boob getting pumped.
Yeah.
Let's say. So we love
hypothetically.
That.
Yeah.
But now you're in. We'll wrap up with this last piece, which is now you're in a very different stage of parenting. You're not in that place anymore. Right. You have a 7-year-old.
He's turning 7 tomorrow.
A 7-year-old tomorrow. And how does parenting look now?
Oof.
And what kind of hard it is, because I think there's this important thing, like parenting is never not hard. It's just the kind of hard it changes.
Correct.
So what kind of hard are we in now?
Correct. It's interesting. I feel so intensely how much we're in this transition period where he'll come home and say things and I'm like, what are you, 14? Like,
He's
weird
not
like
a boy.
attitude. It's exactly that. Whereas like there'll be like weird attitude or sarcasm, or he'll get mad about it, or he'll know something that I'm like, how do you know about that, or whatever. But then also is just an extreme smush and really just wants to still cuddle. And we had like a great tooth fairy night last night, so there's like all that good stuff is going on. So I feel now that school is, and also I can't even, we'll do it separate, sit down one day about LA private school. Good God. But
I have a lot of questions about that.
but if, I feel like that's a whole game in and of itself, because you're just, again, trying to pick like, who are my people, right? Like whatever, we'll figure out the things about the classes and the whatever, but what kind of people do I want my kids surrounded by, and like what's their vibe and what do they believe in and like whatever. And that part is good, but it just feels like now the hard part of parenting is, especially in 2024, especially when the internet and TV and everything is all around your kid all the time, and you can't really give them this like isolated idyllic childhood like
in a
I
small
had
town in New Hampshire.
Think about this all the time. I feel like the hard is trying to figure out constantly what's too much and what's not enough, and like how quickly should he be growing up. And it's a really tricky thing to navigate when the world is coming at you all the time so much the way that it is these days. And so it's that. I'm like, I don't want him to know about this yet, or I don't, he doesn't need to worry about this. But if he doesn't know about this other thing, like all of the kids at school will be talking, it's like the kind of this weird crunchy phase that feels like I'm trying to hold on to his innocence as long as possible.
Take notes.
It's very, but so far he's an awesome guy. So.
Well, this has been such a joy. I'm so happy you came to the closet.
Thank you for having me in this closet.
I'm so curious how the Whoopie Pies are going to taste to a person who knows what a Whoopie Pie is supposed to taste like.
Cannot wait.
And I can't wait for people to see Dick Bunny, because they're really going to, if you are a person who has had a child that was very small and you were the primary parent for that child, I think this will really resonate. Well, Katie, this was such a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I can't wait to have another chat.
Yes, please. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for another chat in the closet. In the meantime, follow along on Instagram at mutha.life for our regular recipes, rants, and riots. And check out our website, www.mutha.life. This podcast was produced by Mutha Life, music by Ronan Liv.